Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles and come to the third story in that series called Jason and the Argonauts. Now this will be the first one that we do, so it's just part one, which is called The Wicked Uncle, right? The first chapter. Now, if you haven't kind of taken a dive into this yet, the story of Jason and the Argonauts is a really famous Greek myth. It's definitely worth checking out and learning more about before you dive into the story. Of course, you can just dive in and read it here if you want, but I think it's always better to get a little bit of the background information. So if you're looking for more info on Jason the Argonauts, you can find a bunch of great stuff anywhere, honestly, right? You could look on YouTube, find some great videos. The one that I used in my classroom a lot is World History Encyclopedia, had a great article on Jason the Argonauts. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. If you want to take a look at my website, I've put a couple of those resources right there in the start before people start reading. If you're more of like a visual person, I'd say YouTube has some great stuff. Just make sure you kind of parse through and find something that's legit. If you want to read more of an article, again, World History Encyclopedia is a great resource. I love it in the classroom, use it all the time. It's kind of got a feel of like Wikipedia, but it's edited by actual historians and classicists, so it's got a lot of great information there. I have nothing to do with it. I'm just a fan and use it. So again, one way or another, use whatever resource you want, but I would highly recommend that you kind of start by doing a little bit of background info, just so you understand the full story before you dive in. You can enjoy it a little more. Now, before we start translating, like I always tell you in these videos, the first thing that you really want to do whenever you're reading in Latin is try to do a little bit of pre-read and get some vocab. You've heard me say this a lot, right? But it's really hard to understand what's going on in these stories if you don't know what the words mean. So the good thing for you is that if you're reading through Jason the Argonauts, there's a lot of great commentaries out there. The one that I think is one of the best is Jeffrey Stedman's. He's laid this all out. He's given grammar notes, vocab help, just a lot of great stuff that you could use. So that would be my recommendation for you. And he's also laid out, Stedman has laid out a vocab list, right? So you can just take that vocab list, upload it into Quizlet. A lot of people have done that. I know I've done that with my vocab list as well. But you can find them on Quizlet and just use that to practice. That way you know what the words are. You get kind of a jump start. If you don't want to use a commentary, just pre-read the story, right? Go through. Any words you don't recognize, pick them out and just make a vocab list so you can start practicing that way. The other thing that I always recommend is try to read this aloud. You know, you've heard me say this a lot as well, but if you're a student, find a classmate, someone you can read the story to, have them read it back to you. That way, when you're working, when you're reading it to them, you're working on your pronunciation, your speaking, and when you're having someone read the story back to you, you're working on your listening skills. You never want to shut those off. I know people say Latin's a dead language, which I understand, but bring it to life. Your brain is wired to actually treat this as a language. So if you can listen to it and have someone reading it to you and kind of interact with it that way, it's much better than just doing this in your head, or just translating on a piece of paper, right? So bring it to life, have some fun with it. The last thing I'd always say is do the read and reread method. If you're actually trying to translate it, maybe you're taking a quiz, test, whatever it might be, read through the story, write down any problem areas you have, try to look them up, fix them. This is where a commentary like Jeffrey Stedman would help a lot, and then read the story again. And when you keep doing that and repeating the process, your list of problems should get smaller and smaller until you're able to read this from start to finish without any help. And that's how you know you're in a good place and ready to move on. Okay. So if you haven't done that, pause the video. Go work on that and just use this video as sort of a double check to make sure that you're on the right track. Okay. Now, something I do want to point out, and people have mentioned this in the comments of my videos before, the color system I use. And I feel like maybe I didn't explain this very well. You can use whatever you want. I always found that color coding was helpful for my students to learn the cases, particularly when they were just starting their Latin journey. Something about seeing the colors just helps them associate which words are going together. So what I've done is this, right? So for the cases, I've just color coded them. You can use this if you want. You're going to see it in my video. You can do it however you want. I just think seeing colors, so you know what the nominative is, the genitive, dative, it just helps you read it a little bit faster and kind of presents the story in a different way. So if you're curious about the colors, that's what it is. Okay. But let's dive into the story. And again, if your translation is kind of close to mine, you're on the right track. Okay. So it starts like this. You have erant olim in Thessalia duo fratres, quorum alter aison pelias alter appellebator. Okay, so it's starting with Olim, right? Once upon a time, right? Once, but I don't know. I think once upon a time is always a fun way to start. So go with whatever you need, right? But once upon a time, there were two brothers, right? Duo fratres, right? There's two brothers in Thessaly. Okay, so Thessaly is a region of Greece. So there was two brothers, of whom, meaning of these two brothers, one. So you have alter, meaning one and the other. So one, appellebator, was called Ison, right? So that's one. And the other, right, was called Pelias, right? Pelias. So you have two brothers, Ison and Pelias, right? And they're just hanging out in Thessaly. Okay, and you're going to see how this ties into the story as we go. Then you have Ison primo regnum obtinuerat, ad post paucos annos Pelias regni cupiditate adductus non modo fratrem suum expulit, sed etiam in animo habebat Iasonem Isonis filium interficere. Okay, so you have Ison, right? One of those brothers. He had obtained the regnum, the rule, the kingship, right? The rule at first, primo. So at first, Ison had obtained the rule. Okay, but after a few years, so post Paucos Annos, so he becomes like the king in this region, right? But after a few years, Pelias, the other brother, he's described as adductus cupiditate regni, right? And you've seen a lot of these phrases if you've been doing, Ritchie's Fabulae. You see that he repeats a lot of phrases. This is one you've seen, kind of led on, right? Adductus, led on by the desire of rule, of kingship, regni cupiditate, right? So he wants to be the king. So what does he do? Well, you have non modo. So not only expulit, he expelled his own brother, fratrem suum. So Pelias expels Ison, right? So not only did he do that, but you need the second half of the correlative. You have sed etiam, right? So not only, but also. So not only does he kick out his brother, but also he had in mind, in animo habebat, right? He had in mind to kill, right? There's your complementary infinitive, interficere, to kill Jason, right? So Iasonem is Jason. Remember in Latin, that I is really the consonantal I, we call it. When you have an I at the beginning of a name followed by a vowel, it's a J in English, right? So that's where we get Jason from. And Jason is the filium Isonis, the son of Ison, right? So basically his nephew, and this is why this chapter is called the wicked uncle, right? We see this story a lot in Greek mythology, right? The uncle plotting against nephews and things like that. So the brother, right? Ison starts as being king first. Pelias, I'm assuming younger brother, I actually don't remember. I'd assume his younger brother. He wants to be king, so he kicks out his brother and he's like, let me kill his son, right? Let me kill Jason. Okay. Then you have quidam tamen ex amicis Isonis ubi sententiam Peliae cognoverunt, puerum e tanto periculo eripere constituerunt. Okay, so you have, however, Tamen, so the Pelias, right, the younger brother, he's like, I'm gonna kill my nephew and kick out my brother, and this horrible plot. However, you have certain men, right? So quidam. Now here, quidam, it looks like it could be the singular or plural. The reason I'm saying certain men is because the verb going with it is cognoverunt, which is plural, right? So that's how you know it's not just a certain man, but certain men, right? So certain men from the friends of Ison, right? So out of the friends of Ison, ex amicis Isonis, so some of his friends, basically, when they learned cognoverunt, right? They learned the sententiam Peliae, the opinion or the feeling of Pelias, right? His sentiment, really, his plan. Well, what do? They constituerunt. They decided, right? This group of men decided to eripere, there's your complementary infinitive, right? To snatch up or take the puerum, the boy, right? Which is Jason. So they decide to snatch up the boy, e tanto periculo, from such danger, right? So they're going to protect Jason. So you have the story of the wicked uncle. He wants to kill Jason. A couple of Ison's friends, right? So Jason's father, his friends, they hear about this and like, no, we're going to save the boy. We're not going to let this happen. Okay. Then you continue, you have noctu igitur, Iasonem ex urbe abstulerant, et cum postero die ad regem rediscent, e renuntiaverunt puerum mortuum esse. Okay, so you have noctu, so at night, right? So igitur is just therefore. So therefore, at night, abstulerant, they took away, right? It's really like abfere, they carried away Jason from the city, right? So they say they're going to protect Jason. So how they do that? They take him away from the city. And cum postero die, when on the following day they returned ad regem, right, to the king, they renuntiaverunt, they reported to him, right? So on the following day when they returned to the king, they reported to him, right? They announced again to him, reported to him that the puerum mortuum esse, that the boy was dead. So you have a lot of indirect statements happening here, which is why you're seeing the accusatives and infinitives. But you can translate and say they reported that the boy was dead. Okay. Which is Jason. So they go out, they protect Jason, they come back, and they tell Pelias, yeah, we killed him. Don't worry about it. Right. And again, you've seen stories like this before. It's kind of a common theme of pretend to kill the kid and, tell someone, yeah, he's dead. Right. We saw this in the Hercules story too. So you have Pelias, right? It continues. You have Pelias cum hoc audivisset etsi revera magnum gaudium percipiebat, specium tamen dolores praebuit et quae causa esset mortis quae sivuit. Okay, so you have Pelias when he had heard this, right? So cum hoc audivisset. So when he'd heard this, right, that Jason is dead. Although in true fact, so re vera means like truly, right? Literally in true fact is kind of one way to do it. So although in fact, right, he felt, right, percipiebat, he felt magnum gaudium, he felt great joy. Nevertheless, right, you can translate tamen, he praebuit, he presented, kind of displayed or presented or showed a specium doloris, a face of sadness. So this is kind of an interesting line. It's saying, although he was feeling great happiness, he's like, perfect, the kid's dead. He doesn't show that to everyone. He displays that he's sad. So it's fake, is the idea. He's kind of like fake sad about it. He's like, oh man, I feel so terrible. This kid died. That's horrible, right? That's what he's doing. So again, the specium doloris is like that face of sadness, almost like a mask of sadness. He displayed to everyone. Then you have, and quae causa esset mortis quae sivit. So he asked, quae sivit, he asked what was the cause of the death, right? So quae causa esset mortis, right? So he's going along with this farce, pretending he's like, oh man, that's terrible. How did he die, right? He already knows that he hired men to kill him. But he asks, he says, oh no, how did Jason end up dying? That's terrible. Okay. And then you end the chapter with this line. You have illi autem cum bene intellegerent dolorem eius falsum esse, nescio quam fabulam de morte pueri finxerunt. Okay. So illi is those men, right? And illi is the same group of men as Quidam before, right? The men who saved Jason, right? So you have those men, however, since they understood well, cum bene intellegerent. So since they understood well that, again, it's all this indirect statement that his dolorem eius, right? This is talking about the sadness of the king of Pelias, that his sadness esse falsum, it was false, right? It was fake. So they're looking at this and like, yeah, we know you don't actually care, buddy, right? They get it. Since they understood that his sadness was fake, they finxeron. It means like they made up, right? Is kind of the idea. They made up, and then you have this interesting phrase of nescio quam fabulum. So you can translate this in commentaries to do it. It means like I don't know what is kind of one way to do it. They made up I don't know what story. And it just means like some kind of made up story is really what it's getting at. So they made up a kind of a fake story, de morte pueri, about the death of the boy. And again, that nescio quam fabulum is just like a turn of phrase. I don't know what. So is really kind of how you translate it. But they make up a story about his death, right? So they tell the story about Jason dying, like, yeah, don't worry about it, boss. He's dead. Okay. So chapter 1, again, is called The Wicked Uncle because we're starting to see the pieces of Jason's background put into place, right? Who his father was, Ison, who his uncle was, Pelias, the interaction between these two brothers. One wants to be king, so he gets rid of the other, and how Jason becomes the target. And again, this is not a unique story. We've seen this before. Kind of common. If you want to be king, get rid of the current king and that king's sons, right? And that's what's happening here with Jason. Okay, so a little bit about his background. So as you can tell, if you've been doing the Ritchie's Fabulae stories, they're getting progressively more difficult, right? So the third one has a lot of indirect statement. You're starting to see subjunctive, things like that. So it's kind of going up a notch. But again, if you're able to read through this without any trouble, that's a good sign that you're in the right spot, right? And you're ready to move on. And you should be feeling pretty good. If you've read the first two stories in Ritchie's, and now you're coming to Jason. So if you've done Hercules and Perseus, and felt good about it, you're probably in a good spot to read this. But if you have any questions at all, put them in the comments below. I'm always happy to help you. But otherwise, if like I said, if you're able to do this, you feel comfortable with it, and what you did matches, kind of close to what mine is. Not that mine's perfect. You can feel that you're in a good spot to move on. So hopefully it made sense. Again, let me know if anything. But otherwise, keep at it and good luck.